Democratic presidential candidates are ramping up their campaigns with just days to go until the South Carolina primary and Super Tuesday. The latest poll of South Carolina shows former Vice President Joe Biden in the lead of likely Democratic primary voters. It shows him with a 20-point lead over Senator Bernie Sanders, who won both Nevada and New Hampshire. South Carolina is the final primary before Super Tuesday, where 14 states will hold primaries on March 3rd. More than 1,300 delegates are up for grabs that day, and that's more than a third of the delegates needed to win the nomination. Senator Sanders held a rally in North Carolina today, which is one of the Super Tuesday states. He had a message for people who think he can't beat President Trump.
Take a look at a poll that just came out this morning in Pennsylvania. Bernie is the only Democrat to beat Trump in Pennsylvania. So don't tell me Bernie can't beat Trump. We're going to beat him. We're going to beat him here in North Carolina. We're going to beat him all over this country.
And for more on the 2020 race, I want to bring in Caitlin Huey-Burns, Miriam Elder, and Adam Harris. Caitlin is our CBSN political reporter. Miriam is a political reporter for BuzzFeed covering Trump 2020. And Adam Harris covers national politics for The Atlantic. Welcome to all of you. Caitlin, the Biden campaign told supporters Thursday it raised $1.2 million Wednesday, the day after the debate. They called it their best fundraising day since the campaign launch. So what does this mean for the campaign going into the upcoming primary?
Well, the Biden campaign has really struggled to fundraise or keep up with the fundraising of his big rivals. Think about the amount of money that someone like Bernie Sanders has been consistently able to bring in through kind of a grassroots organization. This is a critical time for the Biden campaign. We're just a couple of days from the South Carolina primary, which the Biden campaign has said that this is where the big campaign really begins. He is relying on a win here to help boost him into those Super Tuesday states. But the Super Tuesday contests come just a couple of days after that South Carolina primary, which means that candidates have to be spending their time in many places at once. These contests range from North Carolina all the way over to California. So it takes a lot of money, not only to travel around, but to run advertising on air, to kind of have a robust campaign in these states. And this is something that the Biden campaign will have to contend with. In this point of the race, the debates and wins in primaries and caucuses really serve as the main fundraising tool for a lot of these candidates. So while it's important that he's bringing in that money, you have to also compare it to what other candidates have been doing. Remember that Las Vegas debate where Elizabeth Warren's campaign said she did really well? She brought about $3 million the day after that debate. Bernie Sanders has been able to bring in lots of money. And of course, they're all contending with Michael Bloomberg, who is self-financing his campaign and running really unlimited amounts of money on air. So while the Biden campaign can take this as a good day or good week for the campaign, it does raise the question of can he keep that momentum, and we'll see if he can on Saturday.
All right, so Miriam, speaking of keeping that momentum, how important would a win in South Carolina be for Joe Biden?
I mean, if he were to lose in South Carolina, a state that he has been betting everything on and that he has been expecting to win, and everyone's been expecting him to win for a long time, he would have been out for the count, which is something people have been looking for. So obviously a win, while expected, would be a huge deal for him. And it really is all about the momentum and how he can carry it forward.
Do you think it's crucial for him?
States.
Do you think he'll be able to bounce back if he doesn't win?
I mean, the polls right now are showing him so ahead. It's hard to even countenance a way in which he doesn't win. But yeah, there would obviously have to be a lot of soul searching if he lost a state that he has really been talking up so much,
right,
and focusing on.
And Adam, as you know, black voters make up about 60% of Democratic voters in South Carolina. How significant is this? And tell us why the majority there seem to support Joe Biden.
So this is incredibly significant for Joe Biden. I mean, he's always kind of seen South Carolina as his firewall, and that's because of the support that he's had among black voters. I think right now in the most recent Monmouth poll, he's at about 45% with black voters in the state. So that's a significant chunk of the black voting population. And there's this idea that black voters know Joe. That's one of the things that Jim Clyburn, one of the most prominent Democrats from South Carolina, said in his endorsement the other day, was that, we know Joe and Joe knows us, and that goes a long way in terms of their support for former Vice President Biden.
Right, and Miriam, I want to ask you about Senator Sanders. I mean, obviously, he's coming off of wins in Nevada and New Hampshire. It doesn't look, according to the polling, like he's going to quite get South Carolina. What would have to happen in the next few days for the Sanders campaign to emerge victorious there?
In South Carolina?
Yeah.
Well, Sanders has positioned his entire campaign as one about turnout. But again, as you've mentioned, he hasn't been able to garner the support there. And while he has brought out, a diverse coalition of voters in a state like Nevada, whether he can do that in South Carolina, especially when he's up against somebody like Joe Biden, who does have so much support in the black community, it's going to be incredibly difficult.
So it's looking unlikely for him at this point. Adam, Michael Bloomberg released results from his cardiac tests, and he's calling on Bernie Sanders to do the same. That brings up a good question. How much does the factor of health come into play during this race?
It's a major factor. I mean, when you have three candidates over the age of 77, you have one candidate who's 70 years old. I mean, it's a significant factor overall. I mean, both Bernie Sanders and Michael Bloomberg have both had two stints. There was a moment, a back and forth between Sanders and Bloomberg the other night where he said, well, both of us have two stints, and Bloomberg said, well, that was 25 years ago. But the fact that both of them are 78 years old does raise a lot of questions with voters of, okay, can they go the distance? This is a really grueling campaign. It's a really grueling process, and that age is definitely going to be a factor in the race.
Caitlin, I want to ask you about the reports today that Bloomberg's campaign has floated the possibility of Andrew Yang becoming his running mate. You reached out to the campaign. What did they say?
Right. Well, the campaign told me they're declining to comment on this one, but it comes as Michael Bloomberg has really been putting it all on the line for Super Tuesday. We're less than a week away from those key contests, as you mentioned, and this is where he says he has been competing. Remember, he hasn't been competing in the first four early states. He's not competing here in South Carolina, putting it all on Super Tuesday. Now, this also reminded me of 4 years ago in April when Ted Cruz announced Carly Fiorina as his running mate as kind of a last-ditch attempt to revive his campaign when it became clear that Donald Trump was on his way to the nomination. So you could kind of consider this, if true, kind of a way to revive his campaign, as he's been slipping in the polls a little bit after a couple of pretty poor debate performances. But it also raises the question of, how his campaign is going. But our fellow campaign reporters, Ben Mitchell and Nicole Skanga, have reported that Andrew Yang has been talking to a lot of these candidates since dropping out of the race after the New Hampshire primary. He is someone who is a key figure in the Democratic Party right now, had kind of an unlikely rise to the debate stages and to the national stage as a presidential candidate. So he's going to be a key figure. He's going to be someone who's courted probably by a lot of these candidates in terms of having some place in the Democratic Party or a future administration. And we're all waiting to see kind of what plans he might announce for himself later this year.
All right, Miriam, the president is having a rally in South Carolina Friday ahead of the Democratic primary on Saturday. We know that he doesn't like to be out of the limelight. Is that part of why he's doing that, or is this part of a larger campaign strategy? What is his campaign strategy at this point?
I mean, I think that the rallies serve a couple of purposes. You're right. It's to make sure that he doesn't give up all the attention. It also, I think, really fulfills his own ego. He feels like he's a man under siege in the White House by a press that despises him, and there he is in the glow of these roaring crowds. And then the third is it really is part of their strategy. For all the people who get into the rally, there are thousands upon thousands more who sign up, and then that becomes data for the campaign. They get all their contact information. They do targeted advertising on all the platforms, on text messages. So it's also really about reaching as many people as possible and making sure that voters, I don't know how they could forget about Donald Trump, but making sure that voters don't forget that he's out there too.
And by all accounts, he's continuing to draw very large crowds to these rallies, correct?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. They're always huge.
Right. All right, so Caitlin, you are outside of a Bernie Sanders event. Can you tell us what's happening there tonight?
Yeah, we're here on the campus of Wofford College in Spartanburg, South Carolina. He's going to be holding a rally in this auditorium right behind me. He's also spending some more time in South Carolina tomorrow. He's hoping to really close that gap, that margin between himself and Joe Biden, and hoping to show that he's able to continue to expand his base of support. Remember, we're now into what is going to be a really key test for Democrats. Can they expand their support among black voters who are really really crucial for securing the nomination. But then he's off to campaign in the Super Tuesday states. His home state of Vermont will also be voting on Tuesday. So he is kind of going everywhere, trying to continue to campaign, to continue to expand his base, and to seize the momentum that he has as the front runner in this race right now.
All right. Well, Caitlin Huey-Burns, Miriam Elder, and Adam Harris, thanks to all of you for joining us. We really appreciate it.